Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is our co-host, Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing fine, and I want to talk about a very important issue. And we've talked about this country before, with dealing in our foreign policy, and that's Iran. It's been in the news. They've had sanctions put on them. I don't know what the punishment was for, because the UN, certified them as living up to the agreement on a nuclear agreement that was drawn up under the previous administration. A lot of people consider that one of the most important things Obama might have done in that whole time was, sort of make a move in the right direction. But nevertheless, our president, the current president, is not too happy with this. And he sort of had an axe to grind with Iran, even as a candidate. So the one thing we can't do on this particular issue is criticize Trump for not being consistent. Yeah. At times he is inconsistent. But then again, we had a George W. Bush that talked about foreign policy a lot, and we didn't like his foreign policy. But he did not have the same rhetoric. He was, somebody that was talking about a humble foreign policy, and that, is quite a bit different. Now, Trump has not been very humble. In a way, though, we ended up with two presidents that are turned out both being pretty darn aggressive in their foreign policy. But what we want to talk about today is the dealing with, the certification and sanctions and what the reaction would be. Because whether it's Korea, North Korea, or Iran, they're not going to sit around and just take it. And the main reason they don't is they have politics in their home countries as well. We have politics satisfying left and right, and they have this balance. They try to appease both sides. Well, that happens in Iran too. So they can't look like wimps. And if they're getting sanctions put on and they say nothing or do nothing, then people get angry with them, because in order for Iran to have had this agreement, they had to challenge some of the more militant. But right now, it has been working quite well. But the big question now is Iran is upset. They're annoyed. Things may deteriorate, and they say, if you mess with us anymore, we're getting out of this deal, and cancel all this effort, because there's reason for us to be confident that the UN's not lying to us, that they're not working on a nuclear weapon. So I think it would be very dangerous. I think this policy is dangerous, and hopefully we can work our way out of this without rejecting this movement in the direction of handling, the difficulties with Iran.
Yeah, it seems like with everything else the Trump administration touches on foreign policy, there's a lot of bungling going on, mixed messages. But the timeline is important. As you point out, about a month ago, the UN certified, and the U.S. had to agree with it, certified that Iran was living up to the terms of the 2015 P5+1 deal on nuclear weapons. So they certify it, and then just a couple of weeks later, Congress passes new sanctions on Iran. The president is forced to sign. He said he didn't like it very much. He's forced to sign new sanctions right after they're certified. And so Rouhani, the president of Iran, said, look, as you say, we've had enough. And if you do another round of sanctions, we may pull out of the deal entirely. And if that happens, we may restart our program, and we can restart it within hours. We have better technology now, so it's kind of a warning shot after several provocations.
Yeah, well, the saying is that Iran's made a serious mistake putting their country in the midst of all our bases. Yeah. Looking at what we do and the intimidation that we pose for them. We're there in their backyard and in their front yard and surrounding them. And we continue to do all the testing. We continue with our arsenals. We have these missiles. So if you think about, trying to get along with people, it's obviously going to antagonize them, and that's where we are. I want to read a more lengthy quote on Bush, because it sort of gives us the answer to what we could and should do. And a lot of people have quoted this, and I was excited about it because I thought, well, maybe George W. Bush is going to be a little bit better than the neocons. But he was very, very, this was in a debate with Gore. If we're an arrogant nation, they'll resent us. if we're a humble nation but strong, they'll welcome us. And our nation stands alone right now in the world in terms of power. And that's why we've got to be humble. You know, that's so reasonable, but there's none of that. And then we expect some good to come of this. No, if we put on more sanctions, then I think this thing is going to deteriorate. But if they don't, we're always threatening, the administration is always threatening new sanctions. I can conceive of one thing that would really be a can of worms is, let's say the UN recertifies them and Trump puts enough pressure on Tillerson not to have us confirm the certification.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to blow up a lot of problems. And it's not like we are a humble foreign nation, mind our own business and defend our country. We're not at that stage, so we won't morph into that system.
And I wonder if at that point the Europeans might really break with us. They're furious over these new sanctions, particularly the new sanctions on Russia, because it restricts the Germans' ability to cooperate with Russia on building the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Sanctions German companies if they get involved. So the Europeans are already angry about this. We know that since the deal in 2015, trade between the EU and Iran has increased 78%. We talked about in a previous show. So they're benefiting from free trade that we say we preach. Are they going to, if the UN looks at them and says Iran is just doing fine, and the US says no, they're not, pounding the table, what's the EU going to do at that point? Are they going to say no to all these companies all of a sudden doing business in Iran?
You know, and that shows where our side will become more split, and they'll debate this issue, be more antagonistic. But there has to be more support than just Donald Trump and the United States foreign policy people, because there are. This is, in the bigger picture, is the struggle between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big issue, and what other countries are really very negative on Iran. I guess Saudi Arabia and Israel mostly. Are there other countries that you would say that would fall into that category?
They would be the main ones, and that's the ones that Trump is aligned most closely with. So it just shows that he's taken sides there. But you know, the real issue, the reason why the U.S. put the new sanctions on, the reason why they're irritated, is this whole issue about a part of the deal, the 15 deal, dealing with ballistic missiles. And it is actually very important, because if you really drill down into the language of the agreement, what the neocons say and the Trump people say about it is really not true. Because, there was a 2010 resolution passed that said Iran shall not undertake any activity related to ballistic missiles. That, in terms, that is absolute forbid them from doing it. Well, the 2015 agreement terminated the 2010 deal. The wording is very different. The 2015, the one that's in place now, Iran is called upon not to undertake any activity related to ballistic missiles designed to be capable of delivering nuclear weapons. Called upon and shall not are two very different things. So Iran argues, we're not forbidden from doing this, A. B, we're not putting nuclear weapons on these missiles, we're just developing missiles. And the neocons say, well, no, any ballistic missiles you develop, no matter what, are automatically considered nuclear capable, because why else would you do them if not for nukes? And so this is where we are.
Yeah, and it's this attitude that nobody can do anything unless we give them permission. The argument is somewhat similar to North Korea. They're working on missiles. I think there's a lot of question on how efficient those missiles really are. And some people say they have small nukes, and other people say probably not. But it's like they are not allowed to do this. I mean, it would be nice if they didn't, but if they feel trapped, that might be their only defense. You know, and this is what's happened with our foreign policy, because the record is very clear that if a government, a very questionable government like a Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi, if they give up their weaponry, something that they could retaliate and do serious harm, we're not going to strike them. So if that happens, then if they take the weapons away, then we strike them. So this is the reason whether Un has nothing whatsoever, he has to make them think, well, you know, I may well do have something, and you better not mess with us. And it's to me, it's so unnecessary. I mean, why do we get ourselves into this? And I would think even just leaning toward a little bit of humbleness, you don't have to give up anything. Why can't you be quiet but very strong? But why do you have to be so arrogant and bombastic and say, don't touch us, or we're going to take nothing off the table except common sense. We'll use nukes first if we need to. But all the administrations have done that. This isn't new with this administration. I mean, even the peace president, who won the peace prize, he was not taking anything off the table. It seems like in the background, wherever it is, those people who benefit from war and warmongering and the military state are always seem to be able to provoke these conflicts or pseudo conflicts. Of course, the danger is maybe it won't be so pseudo, and maybe it will become more realistic, and that's why this should be stopped. If we've made progress with Iran and understand what's going on, there's no reason for us to have to provoke this. It just doesn't make any sense.
At some point, the bluster seems to show weakness rather than strength. Strength seems to be something quiet. Jacob Hornberger, our old friend who runs the Future of Freedom Foundation, he had a great article we put up on the RPI website, and he makes a great point that President Trump's threats against Venezuela, threat that, hey, we may attack you militarily, he said that makes the exact case for why countries like North Korea want to have nuclear weapons. I mean, he's making the case. What he says when he does that is he sends out the message to every other smaller country, we better get nukes immediately. Because if not, if we have a little bit of civil unrest, if we elect somebody the Americans don't like, they're going to threaten military strikes.
There was somebody on the internet that made a comment that caught my attention, and they said it was all Reagan's fault. And that was because he invaded Grenada. I said, why is that the case? And he says, who wasn't in charge then, but their government, they recognized that the empire for the United States is so important that they would attack a country like Grenada as a threat, and take over. That they're not going to be free from a threat from the United States. So in a way, it does make a point that there's nothing sacred, except for this, this attitude that we have, this arrogance and this willingness for us to throw our weight around, which doesn't help anybody, I don't believe.
It's easy to get conspiracy minded, but it's almost as if the U.S. wants these countries to do this. You're meddling in the elections in Venezuela. You're trying to overthrow the government. How can you get the Americans out of our hair? We've got to develop some kind of a weapon.
Well, I think you hit something most likely is true there. I think there are people who literally believe it should be continuous, a continuous conflict, and this generates the interest and it generates the expenditures. I mean, when's the last time we actually had a cut in the military budget? After World War II, I think, and that was only temporary because within 5 years we had another big war going on with Korea. So you have to have this going on, but that is the big problem. But I want to give you a chance to give our viewers an update on what's going on, because this is the subject we will be talking about. We're going to be talking about whistleblowers and other issues, mainly foreign policy. But, we do get letters from a lot of people that say the neat part about what we're doing is that we're not geniuses. We don't claim that, but we're one of the very few out there, actually has an organization designed for peace and prosperity and non-intervention and, a strength to defend our country. And so we have a lot of interest, and I want you to just update the viewers with how our conference is going.
Yeah, we sent an update out to our subscribers for the Institute. And you're right. I mean, if this stuff it's so au courant, it's something that is so important right now, and we will be focusing on it. But I sent out an update yesterday. We have a little picture that we made to demonstrate it. We are going to have a roundtable discussion with some of the most important whistleblowers. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. We're so excited that they're joining us. They're going to talk about the need for transparency in the government and privacy for us. And these people, John Kiriakou spent time in prison for exposing the CIA torture program. These people haven't been treated lightly, and I consider them, and I know you do, consider them to be heroes, really great American patriots. We're getting them all together in one room to discuss this issue, and that's only part of our conference. There's a lot more as well.
Well, I think the point that I've always tried to make is to make sure that the government is open. We know what the government is doing, and it's not allowed to be kept secret, and the government should be there to protect our privacy. The other day, the president was asked about what kind of military force are you going to use against Venezuela? And he says, I can't tell you that. That's top secret. I never reveal what I might do. Well, that's wrong. The people ought to know, the Congress should know, and he shouldn't even consider military force without getting permission from the Congress and the people. So this whole idea that military force can be thrown around and I can use military force, it is that attitude is bad that we want to challenge, and it has to be challenged on principle, and it has to be, it has to also be consistent with our constitutions. That's not difficult because the traditions that we've had in our Constitution has strong defense for a non-interventionist foreign policy. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.